The sky was burning, not metaphorically, not poetically. The sky above the Azure Heaven Sect was literally on fire. Crimson chi flames devouring the clouds, swallowing the moon, turning the entire mountain range into a hellscape of light and ash. And at the center of it all, standing on top of the sect's shattered grand hall, 1 foot planted on the broken throne that once belonged to the most powerful immortal in the eastern provinces, was a boy, a slave, Ryu Jin. He was 17 years old. His robes were torn. His arms were streaked with blood, not his own. His eyes glowed with a faint golden light that shouldn't have existed in any living human's body. And around him, below him, at his feet, every single elder of the Azure Heaven Sect knelt. Not stood, not bowed. Knelt, foreheads pressed to the ground, hands trembling. The most powerful cultivators in the region reduced to groveling dust. Elder Kwan, the man who once made Ryu Jin lick spilled wine off the floor, lay face down in the rubble, weeping. Senior disciple Sun Wu, the golden prodigy who could shatter mountains with a single palm, was unconscious 3 meters away, his famous iron spirit fist completely shattered. His hand would never heal properly again. And Sect Master Wei Long, the man who had ruled the Azure Heaven Sect for 300 years, who had killed 9 grandmasters to claim his throne, who had erased entire bloodlines for daring to oppose him. He was on his knees, staring up at Ryu Jin with eyes full of something he hadn't felt in centuries. Terror. How did this happen? How did the lowest creature in the entire sect, a boy with no bloodline, no spiritual roots, no status, no name, end up standing above all of them? Yesterday, he was mopping floors. Yesterday, he was eating scraps from the kitchen trash. Yesterday, he was invisible. A shadow that the disciples stepped over without noticing. A breathing corpse that the elders wouldn't have recognized if you held a blade to their throats. Today, the whole world is hunting him. If you're new here, hit subscribe so you don't miss part 2 of this story. Trust me, you're going to want to see where this goes. Because what Ryu Jin found beneath the sect's own foundation was never meant to be found. Not by a disciple, not by an elder, not even by the sect master himself. It was buried for a reason, and the reason was about to wake up. So let's go back. Back to before the fire, before the kneeling, before the golden light in his eyes, back to when Ryu Jin was nothing. What forbidden secret did this broken slave uncover beneath the sect's own foundation? The answer starts with a cellar, a mop, and a boy who had nothing left to lose. Ryu Jin woke up in a cellar, not a room, not a dormitory, a cellar. 4 stone walls, no window, 1 iron door with a slot at the bottom where someone slid a tray of food once a day. And calling it food was generous. It was kitchen waste, vegetable peels, fish bones, rice scraps stuck to the sides of pots that the kitchen staff had already scraped twice. He ate it, every single time, because the alternative was starving, and Ryu Jin had starved before. He knew what it felt like when your stomach started digesting itself. He promised himself he'd never feel that again, so he ate the scraps. He drank from the cracked water jug by the door. He folded his thin blanket, stood up, and prepared for another day of being invisible. That was Ryu Jin's life. Had been for 6 years. He'd been brought to the Azure Heaven Sect at age 11. An orphan with no clan name, no spiritual roots detected during the standard assessment, no bloodline resonance in the ancestral testing crystal. The recruitment elders took one look at him and laughed, but the sect needed slaves. Every great institution needed people to clean its floors. And so Ryu Jin was given a mop, a bucket, and a cellar to sleep in. 6 years. 6 years of mopping hallways that disciples walked on without looking down. 6 years of hauling garbage from the Spirit Beast pens. 6 years of being addressed not by name, but by a number, Slave 9. Because giving him a name would imply he mattered. He didn't matter. Everyone agreed on that, especially senior disciple Sun Wu. Sun Wu was everything Ryu Jin wasn't. Tall, handsome, born into the Sun Clan, one of the 4 great cultivation families. His spiritual roots had tested at the highest purity the sect had seen in a generation. He'd reached Foundation Stage 4 by age 16, a feat that normally took disciplined cultivators decades. And he never let anyone forget it. It was a Tuesday morning. Not that days of the week meant much inside the sect, but Ryu Jin tracked them anyway because it was one of the few things he could control when Sun Wu found him in the Eastern Training Courtyard. Ryu Jin was on his knees, scrubbing a stain out of the stone floor that some disciple had left after a sparring session. The stain was dried spirit blood, harder than normal blood, almost like resin. It required physical force to remove. No cleaning technique existed for it, just a brush, water, and a whole lot of pain. Sun Wu's shadow fell over him first, then his voice. Still scrubbing, 9. Ryu Jin didn't look up. He kept scrubbing. Sun Wu leaned down. His robes were silk, pale blue with silver thread, the kind that cost more than most families earned in a year. He smelled like spirit tea, the expensive kind, the kind brewed from leaves that only grew on the sect's highest peak. "You missed a spot," Sun Wu said. Then he lifted his foot and pressed it onto the back of Ryu Jin's head, pushed his face into the wet stone floor. The disciples behind him, there were always disciples behind him, a permanent entourage of admirers and hangers-on, erupted into laughter. One of them clapped. Another pulled out a communication jade, probably recording the whole thing to share later. Ryu Jin's cheek ground against the rough stone. Water from the bucket seeped into his hair. The brush slipped from his fingers. "You know what I love about you, Nine?" Sun Wu pressed harder. "You never fight back. Not once. Not in 6 years." He was right. Ryu Jin never fought back. Not because he was a coward, though that's what everyone assumed, but because the one time he had tried, when he was 12, when a disciple had kicked his food tray across the cellar, and Ryu Jin had shoved him back. The response had been 3 days locked in the underground darkness chamber, with no food, no water, no light. The sect called it discipline correction. Ryu Jin called it the 3 days he almost lost his mind. He never fought back again. Sun Wu lifted his foot. Then, with casual cruelty, he picked up the pot of spirit tea he'd been carrying, the one he'd brewed for his morning training, and poured it slowly over Ryu Jin's head. The tea was warm. Not hot enough to scar, but warm enough to sting. It ran down Ryu Jin's face, into his eyes, down his neck, soaking into his already threadbare shirt. Spirit tea had a faint luminescence. It glowed faintly as it poured, making the whole scene look almost theatrical. Sun Wu crouched down to eye level. Ryu Jin still hadn't looked up. His face was aimed at the floor. Tea dripped from his hair onto the stone. "Even the dogs eat better than you," Sun Wu said. Quiet, almost friendly. That was the worst part. He wasn't even angry. This was just entertainment. He stood, turned, and walked away. His entourage followed. The laughter faded as they rounded the courtyard corner. Ryu Jin stayed on his knees. He picked up the brush. He kept scrubbing. What else was he going to do? The second humiliation came 3 hours later. Ryu Jin was emptying the garbage from the inner disciples' quarters, carrying 2 heavy baskets on a pole across his shoulders, the traditional slave carry method. The basket smelled like fermented spirit herbs and something rotten he didn't want to identify. He passed through the western garden, the only shortcut to the disposal pits, and stopped. Because Lady Sarah was there, Sarah stood with 2 other female disciples near the garden's central fountain. She wore the cream and gold robes of an inner sect initiate, a rank that put her firmly in the elite tier. Her black hair was pinned up with a jade ornament. She looked polished, important, like someone who belonged, and she had once been Ryu Jin's only friend. They'd grown up in the same village before being recruited. They'd been on the same cart to the sect. For the first 2 years, they'd shared meals in secret. Sarah would sneak extra rice from her initiate rations and bring it to his cellar. She'd told him, "We'll get through this together." Then she'd tested positive for the cloud spirit root, a rare high-purity resonance. And overnight, she'd been promoted to inner initiate, given robes, given quarters, given a future, and Ryu Jin had stayed in his cellar. They stopped speaking, not because of a fight, not because of a betrayal. Sarah simply stopped coming. The rice stopped appearing. The visits stopped. And when Ryu Jin had tried to approach her once, during a sect ceremony, she'd looked through him like he was made of air. That had been 2 years ago. Today, one of the disciples beside her, a noble-born girl from the Han clan, noticed Ryu Jin carrying the garbage baskets. She wrinkled her nose. "Who is that?" the Han girl asked, not bothering to lower her voice. Sarah glanced over. Just a flicker, just a moment, but something crossed her face. Recognition, discomfort, and then a very deliberate decision. "Nobody," Sarah said. "Just a stray." The Han girl tilted her head. "I thought I saw you talking to him once." "Last year?" Sarah laughed. It was a practiced laugh, light, dismissive, the kind designed to shut down a conversation without seeming hostile. "I have no idea who he is," Sarah said. "He's a slave. They all look the same." Ryu Jin was standing 6 meters away. They both knew he could hear every word. That was the point. He stood there for a moment. The baskets creaked on his shoulders. The garbage smell filled the garden. Sarah didn't look at him again. Ryu Jin walked on. He didn't drop the baskets. He didn't clench his fists. He didn't shed a single tear, not because he was strong, but because he'd learned that tears changed absolutely nothing. Nobody came when you cried. Nobody cared. He'd learned that lesson in the dark chamber when he was 12. He kept walking. That evening, Elder Kwan summoned him. Elder Kwan was the sect's disciplinary instructor, a middle-aged man with a trimmed beard, cold eyes, and a reputation for absolute ruthlessness. He'd been at the Azure Heaven Sect for 40 years. He'd trained over 100 disciples, and he despised Ryu Jin from the moment the boy arrived, not for any specific reason. Kwan simply believed that the weak existed to serve the strong, and Ryu Jin was the weakest creature in the entire sect. Therefore, Ryu Jin existed to be used. "You're reassigned," Kwan said without looking up from the scroll he was reading. He sat behind his desk in the discipline hall, brush in hand, ink fresh, the Spirit Beast pit. Tonight, full cleaning. Ryu Jin stood in the doorway. The Spirit Beast pit was the sect's lowest containment area, a subterranean cavern where captured spirit beasts were kept for disciple training exercises. It was filthy. It was dangerous. And it was supposed to be maintained by a team of 3 equipped slaves during daylight hours. "Alone?" Ryu Jin asked. Kwan finally looked up. His expression was the kind of flat disinterest that was worse than anger. "Did I stutter? It's night. The beasts are more aggressive at. Are you questioning an elder's order?" Kwan's voice dropped. Not louder, quieter. "That was always worse. You exist because the sect permits it. You eat because we allow it. You breathe because I haven't decided otherwise. Now take your miserable body to the beast pit and clean it, or I'll have your rations cut for a month." Ryu Jin said nothing. He turned. He walked toward the pit entrance at the eastern edge of the sect grounds. No brush, no protective gear, no weapon. Just a mop, a bucket, and a body that hadn't been fed properly in 6 years. The iron door of the pit entrance groaned as he pulled it open. Darkness stared back at him, and somewhere deep inside that darkness, something growled. Something big. Ryu Jin stepped inside anyway, because what other choice did he have? The Spirit Beast pit was not a pit. That was the first thing Ryu Jin realized when he descended the carved stone stairs into the darkness. The sect called it a pit. The disciples called it a hole. The elders called it a containment facility. But what it actually was a labyrinth. The stairs ended after 30 steps and opened into a massive underground cavern. The ceiling was so high that Ryu Jin couldn't see it. Just blackness above, broken by the faint glow of luminescent moss clinging to the walls. The air was thick, wet. It tasted like copper and old earth. And the floor was a nightmare. Bones scattered across the stone-like gravel. Some were small, bird-sized, rat-sized. But some were enormous. Femurs taller than Ryu Jin himself, skulls with fangs the length of his forearm. This was where the sect dumped its captured spirit beasts. Failed training subjects, injured specimens that weren't worth healing, aggressive creatures that couldn't be controlled. All of them thrown down here to rot, fight, or starve. And Elder Kwan had sent one unarmed, half-starved slave to clean it. Ryu Jin gripped his mop like it was a weapon. It wasn't. It was a stick with a rag on the end. Against a spirit beast, even a weak one, it would be about as useful as breathing on them. He took a step forward, then another. The stone was slick with moisture. Something skittered to his left. Small, fat, gone before he could turn his head. Probably a spirit rat. Level 1. Harmless. Probably. He kept walking. The cavern narrowed into a tunnel. The luminescent moss thinned. The darkness thickened until Ryu Jin could barely see his own hand in front of his face. He moved by touch, one hand on the wall, the other holding the mop out in front of him like a blind man's cane, and then he heard it, breathing not his own. Something else. Something large. A wet, rumbling inhale-exhale pattern that vibrated through the stone under his fingers. It was close, maybe 10 meters ahead, maybe 5. Ryu Jin stopped. He held his breath. The breathing continued. Slow, steady, sleeping. He needed to go past it. The tunnel was the only path forward. The main cavern was behind him, and the cleaning targets, the beast waste, the bone piles, the bloodstained stone were deeper in. If he went back now, Kwan would cut his rations. A month without food. Ryu Jin would survive maybe 2 weeks before his body started shutting down. So forward it was. He took one careful step, then another. The breathing got louder, the air got warmer, warmer than it should have been. And then a faint glow. Not moss, something else. A dull orange light pulsing in rhythm with the breathing. Like a heartbeat made of fire, Ryu Jin rounded a bend in the tunnel and saw it, an Iron-Fang Spirit Beast. Level 40, it was massive. 4 meters long, built like a wolf crossed with a lion, with dark iron-colored fur and fangs that gleamed even in the dim light of its own body heat. Its chest rose and fell. Its eyes were closed. One massive paw was extended across the tunnel floor, claws fully extended even in sleep. Curved blades of bone that could slice through steel. Ryu Jin's heart stopped. Not figuratively, it actually skipped a beat. His vision narrowed. His legs went cold. This thing could kill him without waking up. He tried to back away. His foot shifted. His heel pressed down on a bone fragment on the floor. The sound was small, insignificant, In a normal room, it would have been nothing, but in the dead silence of an underground tunnel, it was a thunderclap. The beast's eyes opened. 2 burning orange orbs locked onto Ryu Jin. For a moment, one eternal frozen moment, neither of them moved, then the beast rose. It didn't lunge, it didn't roar, it simply stood up. Slowly, deliberately. The way a predator stands when it knows its prey has nowhere to go. Its mouth opened. Those fangs, those iron fangs, caught the orange glow of its own body heat. A low growl rolled through the tunnel, vibrating Ryu Jin's ribcage. Ryu Jin turned and ran. He didn't think about it. He didn't strategize. His body simply rejected the concept of standing still and being eaten, and he bolted back toward the main cavern. His feet slipped on the wet stone. He stumbled, caught himself, kept running. The sound behind him was devastating. Claws on stone, heavy breathing, the rhythmic thunder of something far too fast for its size. He made it 12 steps, then the floor gave out, not collapsed. Gave out. There was a difference. The stone beneath Ryu Jin's feet didn't crumble. It simply wasn't there anymore. 1 second, he was running on solid ground. The next, he was falling through empty air into a darkness so complete that he couldn't tell which way was up. He screamed. The sound was swallowed immediately. The fall lasted maybe 3 seconds short, but enough time for his life to not flash before his eyes, because there wasn't much worth flashing. Just cellars and mops and garbage baskets, and the sound of Sarah calling him a stray. He hit the ground hard, not stone. Something softer. Damp. Packed earth covered in a layer of something that crumbled under his impact. Old cloth? Dried grass? He couldn't tell. What he knew was that his left ankle twisted badly on landing, his right shoulder slammed into something hard, and the wind got knocked out of his chest so completely that he lay there for 10 seconds, gasping like a landed fish, certain that the Iron-Fang Beast was going to follow him down and tear him apart. It didn't. The hole above him, the one he'd fallen through, was too small. He could hear the beast up there, pacing, snorting. Its orange glow leaked down through the gap like a flashlight through a keyhole, but it couldn't fit. The opening was barely a meter wide. Ryu Jin had fallen through a crack in the tunnel floor into something below it. Something deeper. Something that wasn't on any sect map. He lay on his back. He breathed. He waited for his heart to slow down from its attempted prison break. And then he noticed the light, not the orange glow from above. Something different. Something colder. A faint blue-white luminescence coming from deeper in whatever space he'd landed in. He sat up. His ankle screamed. He ignored it. The space he was in was small, maybe 5 meters across. The walls were carved. Not naturally formed. Carved. Smooth stone, chiseled by hands, ancient hands. The carvings were symbols he didn't recognize. Not modern script, not the standard cultivation runes used by the sect. Something older. Something that predated the Azure Heaven Sect by centuries. And at the center of the room, on a stone altar that was cracked down the middle but still standing, was a book. No, not a book. A manual. It was rotting. The cover was leather, or something like leather, and it was flaking apart, edges crumbling into dust. The binding was frayed. The pages were yellowed and spotted with age damage. It looked like one strong breeze would reduce it to confetti, but it was glowing. That blue-white light, the light that had drawn Ryu Jin's attention, was coming from the manual itself. A faint pulse, like a heartbeat. Slow, patient, waiting. How long had it been sitting here? Decades? Centuries? How many disciples had walked through the tunnel above? How many elders? How many sect masters? And none of them had ever stepped on the one weak spot in the floor that would have dropped them here. None of them had been running for their lives at that exact moment. None of them had been desperate enough. Ryu Jin stood. He limped toward the altar. His rational mind, the part of him that had survived 6 years by being careful, invisible, obedient, screamed at him to stop. Don't touch it. Don't read it. Don't get involved. Go back to the cellar. Eat the scraps. Survive. But the other part of him, the part that was tired, the part that had tea poured on his head this morning, the part that heard Sarah call him a stray, the part that was sent into a beast pit alone at night as a joke by a man who considered him less than furniture, that part reached out and touched the manual. The moment his fingers made contact with the leather cover, the world stopped, not slowed. Stopped. The air froze. The faint orange glow from above went dark. The moisture on the walls halted mid-drip. Ryu Jin's own body locked in place. Every muscle, every nerve, every cell suddenly fixed and immovable except for his eyes, which could still move, and his ears, which could still hear. And then, from everywhere and nowhere, a voice. Not a human voice. Not a beast's growl. Something in between. Something that didn't come from a mouth, but from the space itself, from the carved walls, from the ancient symbols that suddenly lit up one by one, blue-white fire racing around the room in a chain reaction of light. and words appeared in front of his eyes. Not on a screen, not on the manual. Floating in the air itself, burned into his vision like a brand. That forbidden manual detected. Exit. Analyzing Heaven-Defying Codex. Origin, Presect Era, Creator, Unknown. Classification, Forbidden, all sexing. This manual contains techniques that violate the natural order of cultivation. Possession is punishable by execution under Sect Alliance law. Exit user assessment, spiritual roots, none detected. Meridian channels, severed. Cultivation base, 0. Bloodline, common. Exifel user is fundamentally incompatible with all known cultivation methods. Exifel, override activated. Heaven-defying system initializing. The Heaven-Defying Codex does not require spiritual roots. It does not require meridians. It does not require bloodlines. It requires only one condition. The user must have been discarded by the world. Is unlocking Heaven-Defying system. 10,000 times cultivation multiplier activated. The words burned. Ryu Jin felt them, not just saw them, but felt them. Searing into his mind like molten iron poured into a mold. Every character carved itself into his consciousness. His broken meridian channels, the ones that had been severed since birth, the ones that every elder had looked at and shaken their head, they ignited, not healed, not repaired, ignited. Like dead wires suddenly carrying a current they were never designed to hold. Pain, real, blinding, white-hot pain, tore through his body from his core to his extremities. He couldn't scream. His jaw was locked. His body was still frozen by whatever force the manual had triggered. And then, in the space of a single heartbeat, the pain stopped, not gradually, instantly. Like a switch had been flipped, Ryu Jin gasped. His body released. He dropped to one knee on the stone floor, coughing, trembling, drenched in sweat that had appeared from nowhere. His hands shook. His vision swam. But something was different. He could feel it. Something he'd never felt before in his life. A warmth in his chest. Not body heat. Not adrenaline. Something deeper. Something that pulsed and flowed and moved through him with a rhythm that felt like it had always been there. Waiting, dormant, suppressed chi, spiritual energy. The thing that every cultivator built their entire life around. The thing that Ryu Jin had been told, repeatedly, definitively, cruelly, that he would never have. Not because he was weak. Not because he was lazy. Because his meridians were severed. Broken at birth. A congenital defect that the sex healers had confirmed was permanent, and yet here he was. Feeling it move through him like blood through veins. He looked at the manual. It was still on the altar. But it was different now. The rotting leather had stopped flaking. The pages had stopped crumbling. The glow had shifted from blue-white to a deep, warm gold that pulsed in rhythm with the chi in his chest. The manual wasn't just a book. It was alive. Or it had been, once. And it had chosen him. Not Sunwoo with his perfect spiritual roots and his Sun Clan bloodline. Not Sarah with her rare cloud spirit root. Not Elder Kwan with his 40 years of cultivation experience. Not Sect Master Wei Long with his 3 centuries of accumulated power, a slave. Slave number 9. A boy with no name, no roots, no future. The most discarded person in the entire Azure Heaven Sect, Ryu Jin stood up. His ankle didn't hurt anymore. His shoulder didn't hurt anymore. The bruises from this morning, the stiffness from sleeping on stone for 6 years, gone. Not healed. Overwritten, as if his body had been told that the old rules didn't apply anymore. He picked up the manual. It weighed nothing. The pages, despite looking ancient enough to crumble at a touch, were solid and smooth under his fingers. He opened it. The first page had a single line of text, written in the same ancient script as the carvings on the walls. But somehow, and Ryu Jin didn't understand how, he could read it. The knowledge was in his head already. The manual had put it there. The text read, "The world discards you. Good. Now you have nothing to lose. Begin." Ryu Jin closed the manual. He pressed it against his chest. He stood in that ancient chamber, surrounded by symbols he could now understand, in a space that had been hidden beneath the sect for longer than anyone alive could remember. And for the first time in 6 years, maybe for the first time in his entire life, Ryu Jin thought something he had never allowed himself to think before. Not "I want to be strong," not "I want revenge," not "I want to prove them wrong." Something simpler, something quieter, something that cut deeper than anger ever could. In this world, if you don't have power, you don't have value. He had no power. He had no value. He had been a mop, a number, a stray, a shadow, a thing that disciples stepped over and elders ignored. But now he had a manual. He had a system. He had a multiplier that the world had never seen before. And he had time. Because nobody knew where he was. Nobody knew what he'd found. Nobody was coming to check on a slave. Ryu Jin sat down on the altar. He opened the manual to the second page. He began to read. The Azure Heaven Sect had no idea what was about to wake up beneath its feet. Ryu Jin didn't go back to his cellar that night. He didn't go back the next night either. What he did was sit on that altar in the hidden chamber and read, page by page, line by line. The Heaven-Defying Codex wasn't like any cultivation manual he'd ever heard of, and he'd overheard plenty during 6 years of mopping floors while disciples practiced their techniques nearby. Normal manuals taught you how to channel chi, how to circulate it through your meridian network, how to compress it, refine it, push it through your body's natural pathways to strengthen your muscles, bones, and spirit. The Heaven-Defying Codex didn't care about pathways. It didn't teach you to channel chi. It taught you to devour it. The first technique was called spirit absorption. The concept was brutally simple. Every living thing that possessed spiritual energy had that energy concentrated in a core. Spirit beasts had cores in their bodies. Cultivators had cores in their dantian. Even plants, herbs, and certain minerals contained trace amounts of ambient chi. The Heaven-Defying Codex taught Ryu Jin how to pull that energy out. Not gradually, not gently, forcefully, completely. You touched a spirit core, bare skin contact, and the manual's technique turned you into a void, a black hole. The energy ripped out of the source and flooded into you in seconds. And the system multiplier? That was the part that made Ryu Jin's hands shake. Every unit of chi he absorbed wasn't just added to his reserves, it was multiplied. By 10,000, 1 unit of chi from a spirit beast core became 10,000 units in Ryu Jin's body. 100 units became 1 million. The spiritual energy that would normally take a disciple months of meditation to accumulate, Ryu Jin could absorb in a single touch. But it got worse. It got beautifully, terrifyingly worse. Because on the 4th page, in text that glowed faintly gold as Ryu Jin read it, the Codex explained the stacking rule. The Heaven-Defying System core rule. Multiplier stacking. When the user absorbs ki from a single source, the base multiplier is 10,000 times. Ragsit. When the user absorbs ki from multiple sources simultaneously, through simultaneous kills or multi-target absorption, the multipliers do not add. They multiply each other. Ragsit. 2 simultaneous kills, 10,000 times 10,000, 100,000. 3 simultaneous kills, 10,000 times 1,000, 10,000 million thousand times Agasit. Warning. The user's body must be strong enough to contain the absorbed energy. Insufficient physical cultivation will result in spontaneous combustion, J 1 trillion times. 3 simultaneous kills, 3 spirit beasts killed at the same time, and the multiplier became 1 trillion times. Ryu Jin read that line 3 times. Then he closed the manual. Then he opened it again and read it a 4th time to make sure the system hadn't made a mistake. It hadn't. This was insane. This was absolutely, fundamentally, catastrophically insane. This kind of multiplier shouldn't exist. If the sect knew about this, if any cultivator in the world knew about this, the manual would have been destroyed centuries ago. It wasn't just forbidden. It was a threat to the entire structure of power. Every hierarchy, every bloodline, every clan, every sect. All of it built on the assumption that cultivation was slow, that power took decades, centuries, that the strong were strong because they had time and resources and talent. What happened when a slave could gain more power in a single night than a sect master accumulated in 300 years? Ryu Jin was about to find out. He started with the rats, the spirit rats in the cavern above. Level 1 creatures, barely worth mentioning, the weakest things in the pit. Each one had a core the size of a grain of rice, negligible. An embarrassment. No disciple would waste time killing one because the chi gain was so small it was practically invisible. Ryu Jin caught 3 of them on his first night of training. He cornered them near a crack in the cavern wall where they nested. They were fast. Spirit rats could move quicker than a normal human could blink. But Ryu Jin had spent 6 years in a sect full of cultivators. He'd watched footwork. He'd memorized movement patterns. He couldn't use chi yet. His absorption of the manual's knowledge hadn't given him combat techniques, only the theoretical framework. But he understood positioning. He blocked 2 escape routes with rubble, chased the 3rd rat toward the crack, grabbed it barehanded. It bit him. Spirit rat teeth could puncture leather, and the pain was sharp and immediate. But Ryu Jin held on. He pressed his palm against the rat's chest where the core sat, and he pulled. Spirit absorption active. Target, spirit rat, level 1. Chi content 2 units. Multiplier 10,000 times. Absorb 20,000 units. The rat went limp. Its body shriveled, not rotting, not decomposing, just emptying, like a water balloon with a hole in it. The skin went loose. The eyes went flat. In 2 seconds, it was a husk, and Ryu Jin felt warmth flood his chest. 20,000 units. From a single rat. A rat that a disciple would have stepped on without noticing. He caught the second rat. Same process, same result. Another 20,000 units. The third rat tried to run. Ryu Jin was faster this time. Something had changed. Not just his knowledge, his body. The chi already in his system was reinforcing his muscles, his reflexes, his reaction speed. He felt it like a second heartbeat, a pulse of energy that sharpened his vision, steadied his hands, made his movements cleaner. He grabbed the third rat, absorbed it. They spirit absorption complete. 3 targets eliminated. Exit total chi absorbed. 60,000 units. Exit current cultivation level 1. Key refining stage 1. Level 1. He was officially a cultivator, the lowest possible rank. Weaker than a freshly recruited disciple. Weaker than a child with a D-rank spirit root, but he'd gotten there in 10 minutes. With rats, most disciples took 3 months. Night 2. Ryu Jin went deeper into the pit. The middle level of the cavern system was where the real training beast lived. Creatures the sect used for disciple combat practice. They ranged from level 10 to level 25. Wolves, serpents, insect types, all hostile, all dangerous to anything below foundation stage. Ryu Jin was level 1. By every metric the sect used, by every rule the cultivation world operated on, he had no business being here. He should have been mopping floors. He should have been in his cellar. Instead, he was crouched behind a rock formation, watching a pack of 3 Frostfang wolves, level 18 each, circle a water source at the bottom of a shallow ravine. 3 wolves. 3 targets. Simultaneous absorption. If he could kill all 3 at once, or close to it, the multiplier would compound. The problem was range. Spirit absorption required skin contact. Ryu Jin needed to touch all 3 wolves nearly simultaneously for the stacking effect to trigger. And these wolves were fast, aggressive, and hunted in coordinated packs. But Ryu Jin had been watching them for an hour. He knew their pattern. They circled clockwise. They took turns drinking. When one drank, the other 2 gargled. The rotation happened every 40 seconds.